Elden Ring is finally here, the latest tough-as-nails action RPG from developers FromSoft. So far, most major publications are highly praising the game, with a critic score of 97 on Metacritic, and even going as far as labeling it a masterpiece. After jumping once again back into the beautifully dark and punishing experience that FromSoft titles are now famous for, slaying well over 50 bosses and finishing up its story, it's time to take a complete look at the now open world experience and if the game really stacks up to its such illustrious reception. My name's MitchManix, and this is my look into the much anticipated Elden Ring. Before we dive in, I want to warn that although we won't be covering any of the game's overarching story or plotlines, I will be featuring some of the main bosses in this video. Also, if at any point you feel like I've deserved it, please give the video a like and subscribe for more. You wouldn't believe how much that helps out small YouTubers like me. With that out of the way, let's get started. Elden Ring, for both, like me, fans of previous FromSoft games, as well as those looking for a new fantasy epic to conquer, was highly anticipated. And this time around, not only would the game feature a collaboration with George R.R. Martin, the Game of Thrones bloke, but also be set in an open world, as opposed to the previous titles having a more linear style. Now, I'll put my cards on the table with this one early on. The transition, in my opinion at least, wasn't as seamless as some may want you to believe, and I'll cover a little more on that later in the video. The early hours of the game will showcase the dark and mysterious and often unnerving style of storytelling FromSoft do so well.
Have you heard of the Finger Maidens?
Finger Maidens? No, my wife made me cancel my subscription. With cryptic dialogue and some fascinating characters, just adding to the game's feeling of hopelessness and foreboding.
Would you allow me to hold you?
Not being sure who to trust or the motives of others only adds to keep the player engaged in unraveling the secrets of its world.
You are very warm.
Okay, it's getting weird now.
It's not after just a few steps where the game presents you with its first challenges, and those familiar with the Soulsborne games will tell you, FromSoft wastes no time at all when it comes to this. After a certain incident, more on that later, it's here where the shift to the open world really starts to sink in for me, and what benefits it brings. Crashing into enemy camps and seeking out caves to explore made me feel like a kid in a theme park, not knowing which place to go first. And looking back on it after now finishing the game, I'm absolutely blown away with the sheer amount of content the developers have provided in this title. My cynical brain journeyed through the optional castles and dungeons, expecting the gas pedal to come back at any moment. But as I got further through the game, I can honestly say that the wandering off into the unknown for an adventure experience is here, and there's a whole lot of it. Even in the last hours of the storyline, I was encountering totally optional massive areas to explore. Not just that, but each cave, castle or settlement will more often than not include at least one boss to overcome for all manner of loot and upgrades. Loot and upgrades you most definitely will be needing. Everything in this game is out to kill you as fast as possible, and has the capacity to do so.
Jesus, calm down!
And will require a higher amount of focus at nearly all times to progress, smashing your way through some amazingly designed enemies that are constantly changing based on your location, which is staggering given the game's scale.
Holy Squidward on wheels, what the hell is that?
Injecting a sense of accomplishment not just in the defeating of bosses, but even with just traversing across to a desired location. Danger lies around every corner, with nice touches such as smaller enemies calling for backup to try and take out the player through sheer numbers. Concerts cancelled. I was not expecting the land of Elden Ring to feel this varied, and was one of the most profound feelings while playing the game. Open fields to snow-tipped mountains, barely lit caves to glorious epic cityscapes, FromSoft have outdone themselves here when it comes to building the world alongside George R.R. Martin, the Game of Thrones bloke. Some of the locations you will visit are visually stunning, and I found that throughout the entire game, I would have moments where I would just have to stop for a moment and take it all in. That, coupled with the integration of the game's enemies, can make just exploring a truly epic experience. Contemporary FromSoft games would not be complete without its brutally punishing boss encounters, and Elden Ring breaks the scale when it comes to this. 83 total encounters await you in this game, and they feature some of the most aesthetically unique and controller-crushingly difficult boss battles I've ever experienced. As someone who has finished the other FromSoft titles, I was surprised that they managed to keep things so fresh, as well as sometimes insanely hard with these fights, on top of the sheer amount featured in Elden Ring. super fast-moving breakneck engagements to grand David vs. Goliath battles, the game delivers what its more die-hard fans have come to love about the games. And those that are looking for a continuation of the soul-destroying but highly satisfying gameplay of the Soulsborne series will get incredible amounts of enjoyment from Elden Ring. For those that are new to the series, there has been some adjustments made to assist in progression. Players can now apply a customizable set of buffs at the start of the fight via the Flask of Wondrous Physic, as well as summon a whole range of companions to assist them in battle using upgradable Spirit Ashes. Although not quite as giga-chad about it as most, I rarely chose to summon other players' assistance when playing through the other games, due to wanting the satisfaction of slaying the boss myself. But I have to say, I did use the summons a lot more frequently in Elden Ring. Radahn, while looking like the world's most depressing Mario Kart DLC character whizzing around on a tiny little horse,
Poor bastard.
actually encourages you to summon NPC assistance. And with fights such as the Godskin duo, I was left with my pride firmly intact after doing so, as even with a short-lived NPC companion, they were still incredibly challenging, taking on a pair that previously was single boss encounters in their own right simultaneously. Without saying too much, there's even encounters very late into the game that will punish you for leaning on the summon system too much. One downside of the focus of summons, both summoned by the player and some built into the fight itself, is that it adds a fair amount of RNG to boss encounters. Are the summons going to do well or simply get splatted in 40 seconds? Will the summon dodge an attack that when landed heals the boss? Or will I get away with not having to handle that in addition? No amount of perfect dodge rolling can control the dynamics of an NPC companion, and that did lead to some frustrating moments when the margin for error is so tight. Overall, it's nice to see that there are some features to allow those that are new to the games, or are a bit more casual, to experience the later content without making things too much of a cakewalk, for those that still want to slowly slip into insanity, challenging themselves to the maximum. Classes in Elden Ring follow a typical formula found in Dark Souls titles, with 3 main points of focus, being strength, dexterity, and magic users classes. It's hard to really dual spec without sacrificing some survivability or damage somewhere, but respecking in Elden Ring is straightforward, requiring an item that, although is not in abundance, does give the player the chance to fine-tune their builds until they find something that clicks. Gear is plentiful and adds for the opportunities to think up all sorts of builds and strategies when taking on foes. Some mage robes to buff magic to heavy armor, all themed around the stylized world. For example, my strength build spent a lot of his time looking like a tarnished prisoner, entombed in heavy steel, and totally not like a medieval BDSM enthusiast. Something new that is carried over partially from the second Dark Souls installment was the Ashes of War. Special weapon abilities that can be applied to your arsenal add variety as well as some cool looking attacks and animations, adding to the ever-growing toolset at your disposal to theorycraft builds and overcome the challenges. Multiplayer is again provided using the sometimes cumbersome summon signing system, and once again allows for both cooperative and competitive gameplay. Systems centered around the signing up as a protector or a hunter that can be called upon to assist other players from enemy invasions does add a bit of longevity to the game, as well as giving those that focus more on the PvP side of things more variety when it comes to that style of gameplay. I've always longed for a more robust system to play cooperatively, but on the same token applaud the systems for leaning towards encouraging players to take on the world's challenges alone. Maybe an unlockable cooperative mode where the player can run through the game together once they finish the story themselves would be a lot of fun, or maybe that's just me. Nothing too radical has been added to the formula in Elden Ring outside the summons, mounted combat, and the Ashes of War. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and even now after hundreds of hours across many FromSoft games, I still got great enjoyment of my time playing through to the credits. Although overall I really enjoyed Elden Ring, there were some elements that I feel overdid it in creating hurdles to climb over, and I'm not talking about the game's boss battles. The shift to open world, and with it FromSoft's habit of hardly giving you a glance, let alone holding your hand, I quite often found myself not knowing what to do or where to go. Now I know that it's an open world game and half the fun is exploring, but the zones, when you work through them, are clearly designed around a player being a certain level of power. Roaming around some zones in the mid to late game, I found myself steamrolling bosses and mobs clearly scaled for a much lower level me, with nothing to indicate as much. On the other end of things, the incident that I spoke of earlier, with me right at the start of the game with my Dark Souls hat on, sprinting all the way to the fight with Margit at level 6 and nothing but my starter weapons. Now in other RPGs, getting clobbered for the 20th time would be a strong indication that you're underleveled, but with FromSoft's habit of brutal difficulty, I had no idea whether this was the case, or if the boss was just tuned to be incredibly difficult. As opposed to sprinting to the finish with the game, I did a fair amount of side quests and optional bosses, and have to say that without being able to consistently refer back to wikis and guides, there's a lot of wasted time trying to make sense of the highly cryptic NPC dialogue, vaguely pointing me in the direction of my next task.
Greetings, wench. Tell me, where lies the evil of this realm, and with it, its treasures?
you must seek out the spectral chimpanzee and cup the balls of the dragon of Anubis while blasting a fart into the face of the elder turtle. Only then will you unlock the door of the angry hamsters.
I even, like a fair amount of players it seems, completely missed the tutorial at the start of the game, due to not going the correct way at the beginning. Most frequently of all, I found myself after taking out a dungeon and its boss, and then staring out over the landscape, asking myself the question, how do I progress in this game? Previously, with its more linear setup, games such as Dark Souls could be cryptic and devoid of handholding or direction without much cost to the player, as the landscape itself would provide some semblance of indicating where the next steps were to be made, if you chose to do so. However, with the transition to open world and the lack of any concrete sense of direction, leads to potentially a lot of guesswork and wasted time if your goal is to progress once you're done exploring around the smaller pieces of content. Small things such as the lack of updating UI markers to indicate that you have indeed cleared the dungeon and the boss can become a drag in the late game for those that want to seek out all they can without backtracking over content that they've cleared hours previously. Small quality of life additions such as adding some more names to places on the map would go a long way to help the game overall as an open world. Another issue I encountered by my playthrough was with the mounting system. Elden Ring provides you with a cool new mode of transportation to explore the world, and it feels great.
Holy never-ending story, that's a big dragon.
However, the item to mount is mixed in with all the other dozens of items you need to utilize, including your magic and healing recovery items. Since a fair amount of the game's combat, including boss fights, include mounted combat and sometimes a mixture of both grounded and mounted attacks, I lost count of the amount of times I accidentally used a healing item when I wanted the mount, and vice versa. Since the mount is sometimes needed in the heat of battle, I can't help but feel that using a button that was not also used for crucial items such as your healing, that would be another adjustment that would help avoid mad scrambles swapping through items while dodging countless attacks. The shift to the open world for me has some drawbacks, and sometimes Elden Ring can make you mad for all the wrong reasons, and the game will really make you work for progress. But does that ruin the game? No. Why? Well, the answer to that is also tied into whether or not this game can be actually considered a masterpiece, and if it deservedly sits at currently 97 on Metacritic. For fans of the series, and those that love the style of gameplay that will constantly challenge you, push you backwards just to provide you that incredibly satisfying victory, yes, this game is a masterpiece. It will constantly set you up and give you the opportunities to overcome adversity in every corner of its beautifully twisted world. For those that played through the other Soulsborne titles and wondered just how cool it would be to have a whole open world teeming with vicious enemies guarding ever more tantalizing rewards, Elden Ring is the swan song to the Soulsborne games, with a staggering amount of content. However, that also works the other way. If you've played Bloodborne or Dark Souls previously and you didn't get on with it, you will almost certainly find it very hard to truly enjoy Elden Ring. Don't take scores such as 97 and be fooled into thinking that the game is one for all fans of open worlds. In Elden Ring you are going to war. You will laugh, you will rage, you will spend blood, sweat and tears carving out victory in this open world. And that is quite understandably what some players will not enjoy in their open world experience. For me, as someone who still remembers each key moment from the series, who's been utterly enthralled with the dark and mysterious worlds from each offering, Elden Ring is a game previously we could only dream of. A true distillation of what makes these games such an experience, and a true love letter to those that are willing to dust themselves off time and time again and take on some of the most beautiful and brutal combat experiences contemporary gaming has to offer. Thank you so much for watching. Have you played Elden Ring? I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comments. Please give the video a like if you enjoyed it and consider subscribing to the channel for all sorts of RPG and MMO greatness. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Brilliant. The bandit that in his final moments just had...